Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Politdigm Reads. My name is Red, and today we are back with part three, or episode three, of reading the Communist Manifesto. Now, last week, we did not launch an episode because it was, nearing the end of the year. And plus, we did make an announcement saying that we wouldn't be, posting anything as we were taking a break for Christmas. But now it is 2024, and we are back. In fact, the day that I'm recording this is what day of the week is it? It's Monday, and it's January 1st, so it's the first day of the year for me. So yeah, we're back. I'm gonna keep reading the manifesto. I have been wanting to read it quite a bit. I just haven't because I wanted to take a break, of course, and not just that. The reason I've been wanting to read it so much is because during Christmas and the holidays, I myself received more books that I would love to read on here, and I'm sure that Alpha has too. So I'm excited to see what we will be doing there. Currently trying to find where I left off. I already skipped the start of the next chapter. Oh, there you go. Okay, found it. Page 56. We're now on page 56. So yeah, I got a bunch of more books that I'm excited to read on this channel. And so, yeah, let's get into it. Of course, don't forget to follow us over on Threads and our other social media to keep up to date with everything that's going on. Of course, we have now started a new year, so we are excited. We're excited to to work on new stuff and just get back into the flow of doing our podcast and, of course, having our blog. So make sure to follow us over on our social media. Make sure to if you enjoy our content and want to help us, make sure to support us over on Patreon. And if you do so, make sure to also join our Discord server, because if you do both, support us over on Patreon and join the Discord server, you get access to some nice perks, some extra stuff that you can use to, for example, communicate with us more directly, or, for example, submit questions for the podcast Q&A, or join our debate channel. There's a lot of stuff to do there, so make sure to do that. And with that being said, let's get into the manifesto. So I do want to say a little quick thing. If you haven't watched the last episodes, the first episode was the introduction. The next episode was the first chapter. And now we're going to chapter 2, and chapter 1 was written in a way that is not easy to read. I would say that, whilst it's kind of funny because, at least from what I know, the Communist Manifesto is supposed to be known as like this easy to read book, like this easily accessible book for many people. But maybe it's just because English isn't my first language. I did have a little bit of a harsh time reading it, but I did understand it, so that's fine. So yeah, let's do this. So chapter 2, I already started badly. Proletarians and the Communists. In what relation do the communists stand to the proletarians as a whole? The communists do not form a separate party, opposed to other working class parties. They have no interests separate and apart from those of the proletariat as a whole. They do not set up an sectarian principles of their own by which to shape and mount the proletarian movement. The communists are distinguished from the other working class parties by this only. 1. In the national struggle of the proletarians of the different countries, they point out and bring to the front the common interests of the entire proletariat, independently of all nationality. 2. In the various stages of development which the struggle of the working class against the bourgeoisie has to pass through, they always and everywhere represent the interest of the movement as a whole. The communists, therefore, are, on the one hand, practically, the most advanced and resolute section of the working class parties of every country, that section which pushes forward all others. On the other hand, theoretically, they have over the great mass of the proletariat the advantage of clearly understanding the lines of march, the conditions, and the ultimate general result of the proletarian movement. The immediate aim of the communists is the same as that of all other proletarian parties: formation of the proletariat into a class, overthrow of the bourgeoisie supremacy, conquest of political power by the proletariat. The theoretical conclusion of the communists are in no way based on ideas or principles that have been invented or discovered by this or that would-be universal reform. They merely express, in general terms, actual relations springing from an existing class struggle, from a historical movement going on under our very eyes. The abolition of existing property relations is not at all a distinctive feature of communism. All property relations in the past have continually been subject to historical change, consequent upon the change in historical conditions. Okay, next page. The French Revolution, for example, abolished feudal property in favor of bourgeoisie property. The distinguished feature of communism is not the abolishment of property in generally, but the abolishment of bourgeoisie property. But modern bourgeoisie private property is the final and most complete expansion of the system of production and appropriating products that is based on class antagonism, on the exploitation of many by the few. In this sense, the theory of communists may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. We communists have been reproached with the desire of abolishing the right of personally acquiring property as the fruits of man's own labor, which property is alleged to be the groundwork of all personal freedom, activity, and independence. Hard-won, self-acquired, self-earned property. Do you mean the property of the petty artisan and of the small peasant, a form of property that preceded the bourgeoisie form? There is no need to abolish that. The development of industry has, to a great extent, already destroyed it, and is still destroying it daily. Or do you mean modern bourgeoisie private property? But does wage labor create any property for the laborer? Not a bit. It creates capital, i.e., that kind of property which exploits wage labor and which cannot increase except upon conditions of begetting a new supply of wage labor for fresh exploitation. Property in its present form is based on the antagonism of capital and wage labor. Let us examine both sides of this antagonism. To be a capitalist is to have not only a purely personal, but a social status in production. Capital is a collective product, and only by the united action of many members, nay, in the last resort, only by the united action of all members of society, can it be set in motion. Capital is, therefore, not a personal, it is a social power. When, therefore, capital is converted into common property, into the property of all members of society, personal property is not thereby transformed into social property. It is only the social character of the property that is changed. It loses its class character. Let us now take wage labor. The average price of wage labor is the minimum wage, i.e., that quantum of the means of subsistence which is absolutely requisite to keep the laborer in bare existence as a laborer. What, therefore, the wage laborer appropriates by means of his labor merely suffices to prolong and reproduce a bare existence. We by no means intend to abolish this personal appropriation of the products of labor, an appropriation that is made for the maintenance and reproduction of human life, and that leaves no surplus wherewith to command the labor of others. All that we want to do away with is the miserable character of this appropriation, under which the laborer lives merely to increase capital and is allowed to live only in so far as the interest of the ruling class requires it. In bourgeois society, living labor is the means. In bourgeois society, living labor is but a means to increase accumulated labor. In communist society, accumulated labor is but a means to widen, to enrich, to promote to the existence of the laborer. In bourgeoisie society, therefore, the past dominates the present. In communist society, the present dominates the past. In the bourgeoisie society, capital is independent and has individuality, while a living person is dependent and has no individuality. And the abolition of this state of things is called by the bourgeoisie abolition of individuality and freedom, and rightly so. The abolition of bourgeoisie individuality, bourgeoisie independence, and bourgeoisie freedom is undoubtedly aimed at. By freedom by freedom is meant under the present bourgeoisie condition of production, free trade, free selling and buying. But if selling and buying disappears, free selling and buying disappears also. This talk about free selling and buying and all the other brave words of our bourgeoisie about freedom in general have a meaning, if any, only in contrast with restricted selling and buying, with the fettered trades of the Middle Ages, but have no meaning when opposed to the communistic abolition of buying and selling, of the bourgeois condition of production, and of the bourgeoisie itself. You are horrified at our intending to do away with private property, but in our existing society, private property already done away with our 19ths of what? 9/10, seeing that 9/10 written down as words made my brain explode. 9/10 of the population. Its existence for the few is solely due to its non-existence in the hands of those 9/10. You reproach us, therefore, with the intending to do away with a form of property, the necessary condition for those for whose existence is the non-existence of any property for the immense majority of society. In one word, we reproach us with intending to do away with your property. Precisely so, that is just what we intend. From the moment when labor can no longer be converted into capital, money, or rent into a social power capable of being monopolized, i.e., from the moment when individual property can no longer be transformed into bourgeois property, into capital, from the moment you say individuality vanishes. You must therefore confess that by individual you mean no other person than the bourgeois, than the middle class other what? No, you must therefore confess that by individual you mean no other person than the bourgeois, than the middle class owner of property. This person must indeed be swept out of the way and made impossible. Communism deprives no man of the power to appropriate the production of the products of society. All that it does is to deprive him of the power to subjugate and the labor of others by means of such appropriation. It has been objected that upon the abolition of private property, all work will cease and universal laziness will overtake us. According to this, bourgeois society ought long ago to have gone to the dogs through sheer idleness. For those of its members who work acquire nothing, and those who acquire anything do not work. The whole of this objection is but another expression of the tautology that there can no longer be any wage labor when there is no longer any capital. All objections urged against the communistic mode of production and appropriating material products have in the same way been urged against the communistic model of production and appropriating intellectual products. Just as to the bourgeois, the disappearance of class property is the disappearance of production itself. So the disappearance of class culture is to him identical with the disappearance of all culture. That culture, the loss of which he laments, is for the enormous majority a mere training to act as a machine. But don't wrangle with us as long as you apply to our intended abolition of bourgeois property the standards of our bourgeois notion of freedom, culture, law, etc. Your very ideas are but the outgrowth of the conditions of your bourgeois production, bourgeois property, just as your prejudice, no, what? Jurisprudence. I have no idea what this word means. Wait, I'm gonna Google this. Give me a second. Okay, jurisprudence has to do with law. Just as our jurisprudence is but the will of your class made into a law for all, a will whose essential character and direction are determined by the economical conditions of existence of your class. To shove the selfish misconception that induces you to transform into internal laws of nature and of reason the social forms springing from your present mode of production and form of property, historical relations that rise and disappear into the progress of production. This misconception you share with every ruling class that has preceded you. What you see clearly in this case of ancient property, what you admit in the case of feudal property, you are, of course, forbidden to admit in the case of your own bourgeois form of property. Abolition of the family. Even the most radical flare-up at this infamous proposal of the communists. On what foundation is the present family, the bourgeois family, based? On capital, on private gain. In this completely developed form, this family exists only among the bourgeoisie. But this state of things finds its complement in the practical absence of the family among the proletarians and in public prostitution. The bourgeois family will vanish as a matter of course when its complement vanishes, and both will vanish with the vanishing of capital. Do you charge us with wanting to stop the exploitation of children by their parents? To this crime we plead guilty. But you will say, we destroy the most hallowed of relations when we replace home education by social. And your education, is not that also social and determined by the social conditions under which you educate, by the intervention, direct or indirect, of society, by means of school, etc.? The communists have not invented the intervention of society in education. They do but seek to alter the character of that intervention, and to the rescue education from the influences of the ruling class. The bourgeois claptrap but the family and education, but the hollowed correlation of parent and child becomes all mere disgusting. The more by the action of the modern industry, all family ties among the proletarians are torn asunder, and their children transformed into simple articles of commerce and instruments of labor. But you communists would introduce community of women, screams the whole bourgeoisie in chorus. The bourgeois sees in his wife a mere instrument of production. He bears that the instruments of production are to be exploited in common and naturally can come to no other conclusion than that the lot of being common to all will likewise fall to the women. He has not even a suspicion that the real point aimed at is to do away with the status of woman as a mere instrument of production. For the rest, nothing is more ridiculous than the virtuous indignation of our bourgeois at the community of women, which they pretend is to be openly and officially established by the communists. The communists have no need to introduce community of women. It has existed almost from the immorality. From the time of immemorial, sorry. Our bourgeois, not content with having the wives and daughters of their proletarians at their disposal, not to speak of common prostitutes, take the greatest pleasure in seducing each other's wives. Bourgeois marriage is in reality a system of wives in common, and thus, at the most, what the communists might possibly be reproached with is that they desire to introduce, in substitution for a hypocritical, concealed, and openly legalized community of women. For the rest, it is self-evident that the abolition of the present system of production must bring with it the abolition of the community of women springing from the system, i.e., of prostitution, both public and private. The communists are further reproached with desiring to abolish countries and nationality. The working men have no country. We cannot take from them what they have not got. Since the proletariat must first all acquire political supremacy, must rise to be the leading class of the nation, must constitute itself the nation, it is so far itself national, though not in the bourgeois sense of the word. National differences and antagonism between people are daily more and more vanishing, owing the development of the bourgeoisie to the freedom of commerce, to the world market, to uniformity in the mode of production and in the condition of life corresponding throughout. I keep trying to read this word, but I can't do it. There too. God damn it! I finally did it. I don't know why I have such a struggle reading this word. I'm gonna read this part of the sentence again. The mode of production and in the conditions of life corresponding thereto. Finally, I have done it. I'm proud of myself. The supremacy of the proletariat will cause them to vanish still faster. United action of the leading civilized countries, at least, is one of the first conditions for the emancipation of the proletariat. In proportion as the exploitation of one individual by another is put an end to, the exploitation of one nation by another will also be put an end to. In proportion as the antagonism between classes within a nation vanishes, the hostility of one nation to another will come to an end. The charges against communism made for a religious, a philosophical, and generally from an ideological standpoint are not deserving of serious examination. Thus, it requires deep intuition to comprehend the man's idea, views, and conceptions in one word. Man's consciousness changes with every change in the conditions of his material existence, in his social relations and his social life. What else does the history of ideas prove than that intellectual production changes its character in proportion as material production is changed? The ruling idea of each age have ever been the idea of its ruling class. When people speak of ideas that revolutionize society, they do but express the fact that within the old society the elements of a new one have been created, and that the dissolution of the old ideas keeps even pace with the dissolution of the old conditions of existence. When the ancient world was in its last throes, the ancient religions were overcome by Christianity. When Christian ideas succumbed in the 18th century, the rationalists' idea feudal society fought its death battle with the then revolutionary bourgeoisie. The idea of religious liberty and freedom of conscience merely gave expression to the sway of free competition within the domain of knowledge. Undoubtedly, it will be said, religious, moral, philosophical, and juridical ideas have been modified in the course of historical development. But religious morality, philosophy, political science, and law constantly survive this change. There are, besides, internal truths such as freedom, justice, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes internal truths. It abolishes all religion and all morality instead of constituting them on a new basis. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experiences. What does this accusation reduce itself to? The history of all past society has consisted in the development of class antagonism, antagonism that assumed different forms at different epochs. But whatever form they may have taken, one fact is that common to all past ages, not sure what that means, viz. The exploitation of one part of society by the other. No wonder then that the social consciousness of past ages, despite all the multiplicity and variety it displays, moves within certain common forms or general ideas which cannot completely vanish except with the total disappearance of class antagonism. The communist revolution is the most radical rupture with the traditional property relations. No wonder that its development involves the most radical rupture with traditional ideas. But let us have done with the bourgeois objection of communism. We have seen above that the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of ruling class, to win the battle of democracy. The proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degrees all capital from the bourgeoisie, to centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state, i.e., of the proletariat organized as the ruling class, and to increase the total of production forces as rapidly as possible. Of course, in the beginning, this cannot be effected except by means of despotic inroads on the rights of property and on the conditions of bourgeois production. By the means of measures, therefore, which appear economically insufficient and untenable, but which in the course of the movement outstrip themselves, necessitate further inroads upon the old social order and are unavoidable as the means of entirely revolutionizing the model of production. These measures will, of course, be different in different countries. Nevertheless, in most advanced countries, the following will be pretty generally applicable. 1. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purpose. A heavy progression of graduated income tax. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. Centralization of credit in hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. 7. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvements of soil generally in accordance with a common plan. 8. Equal liability for all to labor. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. 9. Combination of agriculture and manufacturing industries. Gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a mere equal distribution of the population over the country. 10. Free education for all children in the public schools. Abolition of children's factory labor and its present form. Combination of education with industrial production, etc., etc. I think that's what etc. means. When it's when in the course of development the class distinction have disappeared and all production has been concentrated into the hands of a vast association of the whole nation, the public power will lose its political character. Political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class over oppressing other. If the proletariat during its contest with the bourgeoisie is compelled by the forces of circumstances to organize itself as a class, if by means of a revolution it makes itself the ruling class and as such sweeps away by force of the old conditions of production, then it will, along with these conditions, have swept away the conditions for the existence of a class antagonism and of classes generally, and will thereby have abolished its own supremacy as a class. In place of the old bourgeoisie society with its classes and class antagonism, we shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. And that was the end of chapter 2. That was quite a short chapter. Much shorter than the first chapter. That was interesting. One or two parts here, which I'll be honest, I have no clue what I was reading about. I'm sorry to say that, but I feel pretty dumb right now, but that's true. There's a part here when it talking about the community of women, I literally have no clue what they're trying to say. I feel like I'm gonna have to read this again at some point just to be able to better understand what they mean exactly by that part. But I got a little confused there. Other than that, this is pretty much like the introduction of like the concepts of communism in like a relatively, I wouldn't say basic form because it's not basic. It is well explained. It's just that it's not like, it's not going into super detail explaining how to do everything. It's just like doing a easy step-by-step process of like what it will take for communism to, for the proletariats to basically be able to take back what's theirs and to be able to achieve a society where there no longer is any social classes, where everybody is worth the same. And we no longer have this idea of exploiting each other for the sake of enriching one small percentage of the population, but rather that we work for the benefit of everybody. Like for many years, I personally didn't quite understand the concept of the communist concept of abolishing private property, and it has taken me many years to kind of comprehend what that means. And I think that it also is that way because as a person who grew up being around life, it has become such a like normal thing to me, like the existence of private property, which made me not be able to fathom the existence of a society without it. But as time goes by, I kind of start realizing that, nothing is our property. Like when you really think about it, like nothing truly is our property. To a degree, it doesn't matter. Like it's all kind of in our heads, right? And I think that's kind of what this chapter tries to tell at some point, is kind of that idea of like, it doesn't matter. Like what we need is to establish a society where we focus on everybody's well-being rather than, having like chasing this kind of what's the word? This kind of fantasy where we must protect individuality at all cost, which is something that, like in the book, the bourgeoisie, or I guess in modern day terms, like the liberal capitalists, kind of this whole idea of like the American dream, and like this whole idea of like we must protect the individual and the individual right to be their own person, is kind of pointless and doesn't really matter. Now, I'm not saying that everybody shouldn't have individual rights, but that's not what the Communist Manifesto is saying, which is like, at least from my understanding, I feel like is a large misconception around communism, is this idea that it is oppressive when it comes to individual rights, and that people don't have individual individual expression, or not allowed to it. I think that definitely in the in the 19th century, I think that the comprehension around individual expression was not as profound or as understood as it is today. And I think that that is one of the things where this book might or might not show its age. And I think that the idea of holding communism to the standard that it is not modern enough is misunderstanding the concept of communism itself. Communism is not a stagnant ideology. It evolves. It's ever changing, and it's not stagnant to like this one idea that was developed in the 19th century. Because if it were, then it's not relevant. And in that sense, since capitalism is predates communism, I would say that if we're following that logic, then capitalism is much more old, or much more obsolete, or just pointless than communism is. Because it is much worse than communism in its like original form, right? If we look at communism when it was first originally formalized, right, made into like a formal concept, comparing to doing that exact same thing to capitalism, and looking at the way that society is, communism is still a more like still a better system, even though it's not perfect, like its original idea. And that's the thing about ideologies, that they change, they evolve, because humanity is ever evolving and changing. And I'm pretty sure that, again, reading this book is not as easy as I would like it to be, but I'm pretty sure that at some point here they do mention this idea of like not stagnating, that communism is like not consistent, like it's not like one constant thing for the rest of time, because it itself recognizes that it must evolve and become better. And I think that makes sense. At least that's my interpretation of it. But I think that, like, to me, the whole concept of communism, which is the focus of this specific chapter, is the idea that we have kind of been brainwashed into this idea of hunting, or constantly chasing like this need for individuality. And I think that stemmed from like just existential problems that humans have by themselves. I might be wrong on that, but that's at least my opinion, is this idea that like we want to feel special, therefore we want to hunt this, we want to chase this individuality. But I think that to me, the failures of liberalism and capitalism is that it chases this individuality, but in the wrong parts of what we are as humans. And I think that communism, whilst it constantly talks about centralizing stuff, the idea of not owning property, it's saying that all the areas where capitalism says that we must be individual, that's wrong. We need to, we work for everybody. We, grow, we make food for everybody. We work as a society to benefit the society. But then, which is something that's never mentioned, at least until now, at no point, and this is my understanding of communism, is that the sections where, for example, capitalism does not give a flying fuck about individuality, which is, who are you? What is your place in society? What do you feel? What do you believe in? Like, can you, like, that's the issue with like capitalism wants so much for you to be an individual, but then you have to like sacrifice your individuality so much, like who you are as a person, because you have to work your entire life to enrich others, but then you never get to express or be your individual self anyways. And I think that by removing all those needs, you essentially create a society where true individuality, true self, your true personality, whatever you want to call it, can truly thrive and exist. At least that's my understanding of it. But of course, we can never communism is a political or economic system, and it's not like a social, what do I call it? Not a social ideology. It's not really a thing, but like of course, in terms of like social understanding and like understanding of gender and sexuality and self-expression, yeah, no shit that like in the 19th century, Marx and Engels would not be as understanding as they would have been today if they were born today. And I'm sure that, without looking at the context, that today they would be seen as having conservative views, but at the time that was maybe they were the progressive ones. Not maybe they were the progressive ones. So that's something that to keep in mind, is just because we need to keep in mind the historical context, the context of the time they were in. And I might be wrong, but there's literally no way to have known this, or at least maybe if I would read more on Marx and Engels, I would eventually get a better understanding of their personal views when it comes to like a more specific like way of seeing the social aspect of life, or like the individual like the individual what's the word, expression of each person. I'm sure that I eventually get a better picture and I could answer that question better or not, but I do think that if they were born today, they would not be, they would be still progressive, because how can you have all of these like communist views and having this understanding of like, we should just be humans and help each other and and work together and all that, and then be oppressive in a social way? At least it doesn't make sense to me. I know that in the USSR, that is basically what they did. They based their system on Marxist-Leninism, but like they then kind of fucked it and had gulags and had all these different things, which were definitely not great. And it's something that if this is the first episode you're watching for some reason, I think that you can definitely understand in the introduction a better view of those concepts within this book. So yeah, with that being said, this was a shorter episode, but a shorter chapter. But yeah, hope you enjoyed my little ramble at the end. And of course, don't forget to support us over on Patreon. Don't forget to join our socials. Don't forget to join our Discord server. And now with that being said, I will see you all in the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.